All right, friends, it is time to nominate to elevate. This is a webinar that's a part of Equip and Connect, a conference for laity and local church leadership for the Western North Carolina Conference. Over the next hour, we'll be talking about strategies for the committees on nominations and leadership development. Thank you for setting aside time to be a part of this. We are going to present a good amount of information. If you have questions, you could put them in the chat. Our co-host, my lovely wife, will help monitor those, and we'll have a time for question and answer at the very end. I'm really excited to lead this session with an outstanding leader. Um, Elaine, could you introduce yourself?
Happily, good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here, and I am just honored that I have the opportunity to co-lead with you. I am a speaker, leadership coach, and author, and I am the CEO of Women of Vision Leadership Institute, which focuses on professional and personal development. I am the wife of a pastor. We live here in Georgia, and Mark and I, if you don't mind me calling you that, Reverend Mark, and I serve on a committee for sorry, let me say that again. Intentional Growth Center, the Intentional Growth Center, where we have been working together. So it is my pleasure to be able to be here with you tonight. I do a lot of work with leadership in the church, in corporate, nonprofit, so every which way. I also have a background in human resources, and so I hope to be able to share some of the strategies and wisdom that I've acquired over the years, and I've seen be helpful in some of the churches that I've worked with.
Thank you, Elaine. And my name is Mark Conforti, and I'm serving as the senior pastor at First United Methodist in Salisbury. And it's a real delight to have this time with you. At the very end of our presentation, we'll have a slide that has Elaine's contact information, so you could get in touch with her for follow-up. Um, I'm kind of easy to find because I'm part of the annual conference leadership. Elaine, we wanted to make sure that her content would be a lot easier for you to find. So you could look for that at the very end of our time together. Um, I want to talk first about basics, about the committee, and then Elaine will spend time talking with us about giftedness, and we'll talk more about um, best practices. And so that's the general trajectory of our time together. If you don't have it already, you may want to find a copy of something called the Book of Discipline. This is published every time that General Conference meets. So the latest one is for 2020/2024. It was just published a few weeks ago. Here's my
Mm.
copy, and you see how it says 2020/2024 on it. The reason why it would be good to have a copy of this book is because you are going to be nominating leaders to
What is happening?
serve in ways that reflect the mission and ministry of the church, many times as outlined in the Book of Discipline. And so that's one resource book you're going to want to have. Another book that you may want to have is entitled Job Descriptions and Leadership Training in the United Methodist Church.
Perfect.
Um, I happen to have an older version of this book. If you're to go to Cokesbury, the latest edition looks a little bit different. It's based on the Book of Discipline. Um, so, um, that particular book would be a really helpful resource because you can use the book to educate the people you are nominating to serve. So, in the Book of Discipline, if you were to look at paragraph 258.1, it gives a description about what your committee does. And just to go over a few items, it says your committee is tasked with identifying, developing, deploying, evaluating, and monitoring leaders to serve. Now, that is a whole lot more than simply filling holes with names. We don't want to just fill holes with names, um, or we don't want to just shuffle names around on a sheet of paper. We don't want to just presume, oh, well, so and so's done this job forever. Let's just keep that person in that slot. Instead, again, identify, develop, deploy, evaluate, monitor. This means that the work of the committee is actually throughout the entire year. Much of it is done in preparation for charge conference because it's your job to present a slate of officers to be approved by the charge conference. And we're not going to go into detail now about each little part. Um, again, the Book of Discipline outlines for you what that looks like. Now, keep this in mind. This committee is the only committee that your pastor is the chairperson over. This committee is the only one that your pastor chairs. And so following the pastor's guidance is absolutely important. And the pastor has the opportunity to cast a vision about what leadership looks like for your local church. One of the things described in the Book of Discipline is it's really important for your committee to engage in biblical and theological reflection, to do that work together for your own formation so that when it comes to the task of nominating, you're doing it from this spiritually healthy posture. So, Elaine is going to reflect with us about some really important Bible passages, um, and think, of course, about the mission of the church. We talk about it always in terms of discipleship. Now, your local church may have a mission statement. If it does, I would highly encourage you to double down on that mission statement and recognizing that the people you nominate to serve, they are given the opportunity to help put flesh on the bones of that mission statement. Um, if you don't know your mission statement for your local church, if that's something that is printed at the bottom of the bulletin or printed in the newsletter and you think you remember what it was, or maybe you remember some session that something was voted on, go back and learn it. Be able to say it off the top of your head. I think that's really important. Now, some local churches have a group of committees that are laid out in a way that is highly consistent with what the Book of Discipline recommends. And there has been a provision for switching from a bunch of different committees that work together to working with what's called a single board structure. So whether you have many different committees or you have a single board, the work of nominations is still highly valuable. Now, I want to talk about the importance of you becoming knowledgeable about every committee and ministry team. You may have ministry teams that your church created um, because you recognized a missional need. Um, and that's wonderful. Um, be in conversation with your pastor about what's the purpose of this committee? What's the purpose of this ministry team? Because when you're inviting people to serve, they're likely going to ask you, what does that group do? So, for example, if you're nominating somebody to serve on the trustees and they say, trustees, what is that? What do they do? If you go back and respond and say, I really don't know, something has to do with the building, that's likely not going to stir up a sense of confidence in them to say yes. If you're going to the great effort of inviting a person to serve, you want to be able to speak competently about what that committee does, what that ministry team does. And remember, you are inviting people to serve. You're not merely asking them to show up to a meeting. I remember one time not too long ago, there was a gentleman who, in the church where I'm serving now, had served for a long time as the church treasurer. and he had done a great job. We wanted him to continue. And so, just for the sake of being thankful for him, of course, I wanted to call him and talk with him and ask him if he would continue. And I think the way I phrased it, I must have been tired that day. I don't remember exactly, but I said something like, "Hey, do you still want to be the treasurer?" And he said back to me, "I think what you mean to ask is, I'm inviting you to continue serving as the treasurer." And he was absolutely right. The words that we use demonstrate the importance of the work, demonstrate the importance of the mission. And so I want us to really be mindful of the words we choose when we talk to people about potential roles. Now, there are two particular roles that I want to talk about here. Well, we could talk about all kinds, but there are two particular. Um, the first is the lay leader. You can read more about the role of the lay leader, paragraph 251.1.c. 251.1.c. Um, the lay leader serves a really significant role, and it's important to recognize that the lay leader is also on several other committees by virtue of being the lay leader. That person is on the finance committee, is on nominations and leadership development too, also on pastor parish or staff parish. Um, and So it's important to know that because when you're inviting a person to serve, they are, by virtue of being the lay leader, also on other committees. And that's by design because it's that person's job to help thread the needle on all of these other elements of the local church. The lay member to annual conference is another one. And now note it's called lay member to annual conference, not delegate, lay member to annual conference. So they are representatives. Yes, that's true. But you're also nominating someone that you have confidence in, that you trust. The lay member to annual conference is also on church council, also on finance, also on SPRC or PPRC. Now, here's the reason why. When a person goes on behalf of the local church as a member to annual conference and we vote on the annual conference budget, that translates to the apportionments that the local churches pay to support the connectional ministries of the church. Therefore, that person serves as one of the interpreters to the finance committee. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been in a finance committee meeting or two when we're looking at the budget, we're trying to figure out how to pay for things. We look at how much the apportionment is, and then somebody says, "Why do we pay those apportionment dollars anyway? What's the deal with that? Why do we have to do that?" Well, the lay member to annual conference can speak up and say, "Well, I was there at Lake Junaluska and I heard the presentations about our ministries that we share together. I heard about the campus ministries. I heard about the camp ministries. I heard about ethnic and justice ministries. And we ought to feel excited about the ways that we're partnering together to do more beyond what we can just do as a local church. We're a connectional church. That's part of their role. And then they also, as a part of SPRC or PPRC, they can help interpret um, the connectional nature of the appointment process because they are there at annual conference. So those are just two particular items that I wanted to mention um, about those two roles. Elaine?
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And in order for us to do our work, I believe that as we know the Bible is, it helps us with direction and information and wisdom. And so as you are in the role of nominating people to serve, I want to first employ you to be conscious and clear about the gifts of the Spirit and the fruit of the Spirit, as well as the diversity of gifts. remembering that the gifts of the Spirit are what you do, and the fruit of the Spirit are who you are, meaning the character. So we want to be thoughtful about what gifts people have, as well as the character that they exhibit, and then making sure that we have a diversity of gifts. Now, I know some of you are clergy and you're very, very familiar with these passages, but I also know that some people are not. And so, for the sake of not making an assumption that everybody knows this, Mark, if you can advance on, I think I can. What is the difference? Because sometimes people get confused. And I'm also aware that we are all at different levels. And so we want to start by clarifying, well, what is the difference between the gifts of the Spirit and the fruit of the Spirit, right? So clearly, the gifts are the fruit of the Spirit are love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control, right? So that is what the character is that we're looking for. But we want to make sure, and I want to go back just one slide here. Yeah. But we want to make sure that we are looking at the fruit of the Spirit, right? Which are the character traits that are developed through relationship with Christ and with one another. I used to tell people that I used to think I was kind and sweet and wonderful until I got married. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay. I wasn't exhibiting the fruit in the very beginning. I'm just saying, okay, I don't know about you all, right? But there's nobody that can bring the best out of you other than your spouse. And so I thought, okay, we're going to have to work on this. I had to repent daily. But the point I'm making here is that we don't, just as Reverend Mark was saying, we don't make decisions based on, the person that's been there forever, the person who's giving the most in tithes. That's not how we make decisions, right? We want to make decisions based on people's gifts and the fruit that we see. If you go to the next slide. So there are several scriptures that lead us in that way, and I will read through 1 Corinthians 12:4-11, right, where it says the gifts of the Spirit is primarily detailed in the New Testament. Now, there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are varieties of services, but the same Lord. And there are varieties of activities, but it's the same God who activates all of them in everyone. And I want to emphasize that, right? It is the same God that activates all of them in everyone, which means every single one of us has at least one gift. We know the story of the talents where some had one and some had two and some had six and some had nine, right? I'm making that up. That's my interpretation. I went to seminary, but I am by no means a theologian. Okay. However, we do also want to focus in to one is given through the Spirit, the utterance of wisdom, and another knowledge, and according to the Spirit, another faith, to another gifts of healing, one of spirit, to the working of knowledge and prophecy, the other discernment, various kinds of tongues, interpretation. All these are activated by one Spirit in the same Spirit. And we've listed them here because, friends, we need all of these gifts to do our work inside the church and outside the church. And so when you are praying, when you are considering people, let us look at what is needed in the particular roles. In some roles, we absolutely need the gift of administration. And in some roles, we absolutely need, right, the gift of faith. In most roles, we need the gift of hospitality. And let me just tell you about that. The gift of hospitality shows up in so many ways. In fact, I didn't share this in my introduction, but I was in the hotel business for 21 years. I did not know that I had the gift of hospitality. All I knew is that it came to me really easily. And then suddenly, the closer I got to God and the more I understood what the gifts were, I was like, oh my God, I was operating in the gift. And so that is one way that we can look for people. If we just stand back in silence, praying, as we consider people, we can see the evidence of their gifting, whether it's at work, at home, in the church, there is evidence of their gifts. And they are diversified. Again, one person may have one or they may have several, but I'm asking you to consider what is most important as we share and look for people to serve in particular positions. I'm going to go to the next slide. So this is something that I practiced when I was at Ben Hill United Methodist Church, which is a very large church. And I have to tell you, I was intimidated when I came into the church. Now, knowing that I've been in leadership all my life, I can step into almost any leadership position and figure something out. But I came into a church that was settled. People knew their places. They were in positions for a long time. So I'm sitting there saying, God, I want to serve, but how do I do that? Because nobody was asking me, and I didn't know how to get, if you would, in place. And so I'm believing that you have people in your congregations. You might have people in your community, okay? Because we never said they had to be a member. Did we say that, Mark? Is that like no, I haven't read Discipline lately, but on that one.
Well, that's a great question. Some committees needs to be what we call a professing member,
Yes,
but then there are many opportunities for people who are community members or affiliate members, associate members.
exactly.
Um, and that's especially true when we think about the ministry teams that are created that just the local church finds the need to create. Like, for example, if there's a missions and outreach team that and the church can decide on who's in it and what their role and scope is. And yeah, that could certainly include community partners in some creative ways.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So, as we consider people for the different ministries, the different leadership positions, I want to invite you to consider several different things. One, what is their personality? Some people are extroverts like me, and some people are introverts. Now, me even being an extrovert, I know better because I've been in leadership, I've been in churches, I understand the life of the church. I wasn't just going to bust out and, raise my hand and go, me, because I respected the fact that that my, sisters and brothers had been at this church for a long time and they had a lot of pride in where they were serving. So I'm sitting there in the congregation for about 2 years, not doing a thing. Now I know better. I know I'm supposed to get to work. I know I'm supposed to serve, but nobody asked me and people were looking over me. So I make the point that everyone has a place. And some people are not going to just jump out there and raise their hands. We might have to go to someone and invite them because they're waiting for the invitation. If you all understand what I'm saying, put yes in the chat. Yes, 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 yes. I hear you. I hear you. Some people are introverts and some people are extroverts. Now, then there are those of us, all of us, who have life experiences. And this one in one of my churches just really stuck out to me. The couple created a ministry around grief and serving at the, oh gosh, I just lost the word. We know we serve meals after funerals. I just lost it. The, anyway,
The repast?
The
the
repast.
repast. Thank you. I couldn't get that word out to save my life. Word repast. They made it their ministry to serve the families. It was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. They understood grief. The wife had lost so many family members and so many members, and she remembers what it was like not being served well. So we can become passionate about a ministry because we don't like what was done. She didn't like what she was being asked. She didn't like the fact that, that at some point she was just left alone. And then sometimes people were just, too much for her. So she understood that. How about those women who are single mothers? One of the ministries that we had at one of my churches is they had a car ministry, a car care ministry. That was so amazing. We had men who understood and were able to work with their hands. And again, they understood that there were single mothers out here who needed help. So consider your life experience, consider other people's life experiences, what they've been exposed to. Our abilities and skills, as I just said, the men, there was a whole group of men. They just loved cars. They loved working on them. I brought my car there as a single woman, and I had tears when I left there. They changed my windshield wipers. They changed my oil. They checked my tires. I was so grateful. I was so grateful. And then I say communication. What are the variety of ways that you see people communicate? Some of us are excellent writers. Some of us are great with verbal skills. Some of us are able to work with the deaf, with those who are blind. We have different ways of being able to communicate. Some people may have different languages. Look for all of these skills. And lastly, where are you passionate and what are you passionate about? I am so grateful that I was asked to do this because I am passionate about leadership development. And I want to make sure that as we serve in the church, that we serve the church well. And I don't believe that people should be just thrown into a leadership position. I believe we need to be trained, right? And so that's my passion. And so that's why I'm so grateful to be here tonight. But what is your passion? Are you passionate about worship? Are you passionate about prayer? Are you passionate about discipleship? Are we passionate about missions? Are we passionate about children? Are we passionate about serving and helping wherever we can? Are we passionate about the arts? All these things. God created us just the way we are to be utilized for the building up of the church. And I just want to remind you all to think wide and to think about all of these opportunities, looking at one's personality, looking at their life experiences, looking at the abilities and skills, thinking about how they're able to communicate, and the passion. I hope that these are helpful for you. And more than anything, please know that there are people who are waiting for you to invite them into ministry. Everyone is not going to raise their hand. I also want to ask you to consider that if people have been in a position for many, many years, try and raise up somebody alongside them. Nobody should be serving by themselves. It is much better when we have a partner in case something happens, and then this way the ministry doesn't fall apart. So many of our smaller churches, people are wearing so many hats. We see it in our church. But there are more that can be invited. Remembering too that intergenerational leadership and intergenerational opportunities are before us. So remember to look at everyone. Do not overlook anyone. because everyone has a purpose and everyone can be used in ministry. Mark?
So what I want to do now is spend some time talking about best practices. First, start early in the calendar year. Now is a really good time to start. Don't wait until the church conference schedule is set and then you feel like you need to scramble. Start now. That biblical and theological reflection, start that work now. Something else you can do, you can offer some sort of class and learning opportunity along the lines of what Elaine was detailing for us about gifts, about what the Bible says about gifts. You could do some sort of inventory to help people explore their personalities. You can use the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or DISC, or I recently learned about something called ALP that a professor at Queen's University created, ways for people to understand who they are and what they have to offer. Um, Something that I've done is offered a brief Bible study on spiritual gifts, and then at the end of the Bible study, simply ask people to say, okay, how can you see yourself utilizing these gifts? And then I use that as data to bring to the nominations committee. Okay, so, but all of that will only have the opportunity to work if you start early in the calendar year. So, if you're here as a pastor and you're the chairperson of this committee for your local church, I would suggest that you start soon. If you are a layperson, talk to your pastor and say, at the webinar Monday night, I heard that it would be a good idea for us to start early, and you can blame me. Um, Second best practice, you must insist upon confidentiality. Now, when we talk about confidentiality, I want you to look closely at that word. If you break it down, the etymology means to keep faith with. It's not about secrets. It's not about lording information over others. Um, it's about trusting the right time to share information in the right channel by the right people. If information is shared too early, it could be misconstrued, it could be misinterpreted, it could be mishandled, unfortunately. And think of it like this: as much as I like raw cookie dough, you really shouldn't serve chocolate chip cookies until the cookies are fully baked and cooled off and ready to serve. As much as I like brownie batter, you really shouldn't serve the brownies unless the brownies are cooked all the way and they're cooled and cut and ready to serve, right? Information must be shared at the right time. Um, Now, along these lines, consider your committee members all signing a simple covenant. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant or long. Probably the more simple, the better, quite frankly. It can include your mission statement. Maybe it could be something like, um, we commit to serving faithfully together as a part of the committee, keeping confidentiality as we endeavor to do this work to foster the mission of the church, something like that. And everybody can sign it together, and you can hold one another accountable with mutual love. So consider everybody signing a simple covenant. And when you meet, you need to remind yourselves of the mission of the church with biblical wisdom, remembering those passages that Elaine mentioned, um, helping us to remember who we are as the church. That kind of work, we need to remind ourselves of this over and over and over again. If we don't, then we're just going to likely go back to just trying to fill slots with names. But along that line, here's another best practice. Create two lists, people who are over and underutilized. I would imagine that every church can easily come up with a list of people who are overutilized. The person who leads the men's breakfast, who also teaches Sunday school, who's also the head usher, who's also there to scrape the snow and the ice, who is always right? The woman who is always there to lead the bazaar, who is always on the committee, who is we could all think of examples of people who are overutilized, and it would be good to name them with great thanksgiving for their faithfulness. And we can say, you know what? This person does a great job and we're thankful. We can think of other people. Creating the list of people who are underutilized, that's a little bit more work, but it's worthwhile. You can use both of those lists for your discernment appropriately. All right, some more best practices. Remember to only speak and act within the directives of the committee. In other words, sometimes people talk outside of the committee in a way that's not helpful and, quite frankly, inappropriate. Here's a very common example, okay? Suppose a committee member, by him or herself, is having a conversation with a fellow church member, and hey, you know what? Our nominations team is going to meet, and I think you'd be really great for trustees. Would you do it? And then the person's like, oh, well, yeah, I guess so. And then the committee meets. All right, who do we want to serve on trustees? Well, I already talked to so and so, and she said that she'd do it. No, 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 that's not how we operate. Um, do not take it as your own initiative to invite somebody to serve. Only do it when the committee has agreed together about who to invite to serve. Don't act rogue. Yeah, don't go rogue. Don't act solo. But here's a practice that I want you to consider, and I give credit to Reverend Katie Lineberger and Reverend Gloria Hughes, who uncovered this great idea. Write a handwritten note to invite people to serve, and then follow up with a phone call or an in-person conversation. Now, again, this would work when you act early. Um, so if you act early enough, you start, mid to late summer, and you have your prospective slate of who you want to invite to serve, write a handwritten note. Dear Bob, our committee met and we are excited to nominate you to serve on the finance committee. We believe that you have the gifts and the passion needed that would help serve that committee to help the church. Please consider this. Pray about this. I will too, and I will follow up with you in a couple of weeks. That practice can really help nurture a deep sense of calling and giving people the sense that who they are matters and the role matters. Elaine, what do you think?
I just wanted to add to that too. It is so important that everyone knows that it's time to nominate and time to recruit. Because sometimes it's kind of done in secret, right? And there could be, again, that person who's just sitting there, just waiting, coach, put me in a game, coach, put me in a game. And they don't know that it's happening. So let us give everyone an opportunity, whether you put it in your bulletin, you make announcements, and you continue to make announcements because we know everybody doesn't show up to church all the time, right? So, we have to put the information out in many ways. We say it, we put it in writing, we send an email, we send a text, whatever, right? We really need to put it out so that everyone knows that they are invited and welcome. I just wanted to add that part.
Yeah, that's very important. Thank you. You're absolutely right. And part of that communication, yeah, I think communicating clearly in writing is important. And not only to invite, but also to communicate to the congregation, here are the people who have agreed to serve. And we don't want people's names to show up as a surprise.
Mm-mm.
When their name is brought forward for a vote, that needs to be thoroughly vetted. No one should be surprised to see their name on a sheet of paper. No one should say, "Well, I didn't know that I agreed to," but here's the last thing I'm going to mention under best practices. Please keep in mind your charge conference schedule, which is set by the district superintendent. It's the pastor's job to communicate that schedule to the congregation. And so, lay people, when you hear the pastor talk about we need to have a slate of officers by a certain time frame, um, you're going to want to work with your pastor to honor that time frame. And pastors, here's something else to remember. Every year, we fill out the annual pastor's report. And according to paragraph 340, we need to offer a reflection about how we provide support, guidance, and training to the lay membership. Now, here's what I think would be a beautiful thing. If the things that we write connect to the work of this committee.
Mhm.
Again, it's not merely throwing names on a sheet of paper to fill slots, but it's about training, empowering, equipping, all those things that we mentioned earlier, uh, monitoring, deploying. Um, if we could hearken back to the work of this committee in the annual pastors report to reflect how we are indeed offering support, guidance, and training, I think we're heading in the right direction. All right, so we have some time before the end
May,
of the hour,
may I
and
just say
Elaine
one
and I
more
would love
thing?
to answer some questions.
Yes, I just want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
Please do not overlook new people. Do not overlook new people. I believe God sends new people to fill the gaps that we have. I didn't finish my story about Ben Hill. So the positions were filled, people got in their places, but there was a ministry that was laying dormant. And guess what? It was my ministry. It was waiting there just for me. And it was this it was to prepare people to be ready to go into ministry. And I was so excited. So I wasn't pushing anybody aside, I wasn't taking anything away. The ministry was laying dormant. Another church, the women's ministry was laying dormant. And I came in, I didn't know what to do, I didn't know where to go. I saw that everybody had their places. And then I kept looking around. I'm thinking, well, why aren't the women getting together? And they said there was nobody to lead us. So please consider your new people. Okay, I'm done.
No, that's so important. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. Okay, the question was asked, do you know where we can get an electronic copy of the updated Book of Discipline? We have the 2016 version, but not the new. Great question. Um, I do not know for sure about the electronic copy. Um, I ordered my print copy off of Cokesbury, and I would imagine that they're going to be the source for the electronic version as well. I know that if you go to umc.org, you can find, you know, paragraphs that have been essentially copied from the Book of Discipline, pasted into the web page in a really easy to read format. Um, I did ask Kim Ingram the question, what differences from 2016 to this Book of Discipline, what differences are there relative to this committee? And she checked line by line, like both books open together, and she said nothing for the work of the committee. However, there are committees that may have some slight variations that we're nominating people to serve on. So that's one thing. Evidently, the one thing that she mentioned was an expanded idea of family relative to SPRC or PPRC, because we have guidance about we don't want two people from the same household Um, but of course, especially some of our smaller churches, especially where we have limited number of people who are available and ready to serve, sometimes we just need to make the best choices available. Um, but I would, Sharon, check Cokesbury.com, see what they have. Thank you for that. All right. And the book title for job descriptions is called Job Descriptions and Leadership Training, written by Betsy
Sure.
Hevner.
Would love to hear from you all. What is a takeaway for you tonight? Like, what will you be able to take back to your church and put into play? We hope that this was meaningful for you. Yeah, you can come off mute, right, Mark? They can come off mute.
Yeah, so thank you both for the presentation. Mark, as many times as I've done this and other appointments as well, the idea of I'm sure I've done it in uh, without the same intentionality, but I like the idea of literally sitting there and making a list and saying who's overutilized and how do we thank them? How do we show, our great appreciation for them? And then literally generating a list of underutilized people. Um, because that's the responsibility is to continue to grow all. And so thank you for that nugget. I had um, again, I've done those maybe in some indirect ways, but I really appreciate that. And of course, the personal written note touch, I like that. I try to still incorporate that into my ministry where I can. Of course, there's multiple forms of technology. Some people, love the QR code and all those kind of things, but something about just a nice handwritten note from the pastor, I think, is still very helpful.
I agree. And as much as I like to text people or rely on email, I think we all can agree the personal touch of a handwritten note might even have more power because of how dependent we are on the electronic stuff all the time. Yeah. Thanks, Aldana.
So, Mark, this is Dana.
Yes.
I don't know if it's necessarily a takeaway, but I did want to share with the group a process that we used. And I think Sharon's on the call here. She uh, uh, gets credit for this. We actually developed an expression of interest form so folks could at least self-nominate or say, and we divided it up into the different committees and into the different areas of potential service. So we didn't have to interview them. They basically would self-nominate and say, here's the areas. We'd ask them, had they served or not? Hopefully, if we've been keeping records, we know that. um, and then we also asked them to just give a brief personal or professional biography, not necessarily a resume, but just some type of, skills in certain functional areas. The other thing that we did, Mark, we have name tags at our church. Our pastor wants us to wear name tags. We actually invested in ribbons that said
Oh,
Nomination and Leadership Committee. So this is an incredible conversation starter with folks like, hey, what does that mean? What are you guys doing? Um,
very cool. Wow.
and actually, Sharon took that concept even further and made ribbons for every committee member to put on their name badge. So now, when you're asking folks, or if somebody's being considered and they want to talk to existing committee members, they can actually find them, assuming they're wearing the name badge with the ribbon on it, and have a meaningful discussion. So I just wanted to share that. We found that to work very well. And it also allowed us to know that some candidates wanted to be considered for two or three different potential
Mm,
posts. So
that's amazing. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
thanks, Dana. I'm glad you brought that up.
yeah.
This is Sharon, Dana, when I worked together on the committee. The one other thing that we did is We, in one of our gatherings outside of church one day, we set up a table with a big poster and I ordered help wanted signs and we posted them all over and we had blinking lights and, to recruit folks because anything to get the word out, especially in our church, we have a fairly large church. So we're trying to constantly think of new things to grab somebody's attention.
Just curious, the form where people can self-select, self-nominate, express their interest, is there some sort of a disclaimer like, hey, just because you fill out this form, this doesn't mean that you're automatically on the committee?
There is.
Yeah, that's good. For what it's worth, I'll say this. There was one time when somebody self-nominated in the in a church where I'm serving. It didn't go well. And this person had um, I would say a goal that was not consistent with the mission of the church, and it caused havoc. Um, so I do see the value, especially in a church as large as Davidson, about using that as a tool to cultivate interest and to connect with people, especially people who may not be on your radar. And I think how to get that out there. Aldana's talking about a ministry fair. I think that's great too. Aldana, can you say more about that?
Yeah, so I can't remember who it was, but somebody just mentioned, the blinking lights and the tables and that kind of stuff. So we didn't have the ribbons. I really like that, so we'll have to add that touch. But we had a representative from each ministry design a fun looking table, something to do with their with the area of service, and and then after church, we would have people go from table to table and talk about what those ministries do, and made a carnival fair kind of atmosphere out of it. So it was really nice.
That's great. I like that. That's awesome. So the question was asked about those who want to serve but don't want their name on a list. Like, um, John, am I understanding you to say like, um, we don't like they don't want to be considered overutilized or underutilized, or they want to serve, but they don't want to be like the go-to person for trustees. Is that what that is?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Combination. Yeah, I have some people who really want to serve. They don't want their name on the list, not really even as a member, although they're going to serve. I guess they don't want the accountability, and I guess it probably scarred from the past. Something probably
oh yeah,
happened
right?
and
Yeah.
critical.
So here's a suggestion. Okay. If you, through your pastoral relationships, know of people who are wanting to serve and but but being on a committee is just not their thing, then I think that's where your savvy working diligently to build relationships. I think that's when you just sort of identify tasks that need to get done that may not be within the purview of a committee, but it's absolutely valuable
Okay.
ministry, right? And I think this is one of the ways that you as the chairperson of the committee can extend the work beyond what's needed for charge conference. Um, like
Okay.
there are always emerging ministries that we don't discover until we're in the middle of it. So it's almost like we always need to kind of keep a list of people that we're hoping to integrate and plug in and utilize. And of course, sometimes a committee will have like a little task force that kind of is a spinoff, and they could be used for a task force for a definitive time and task that has a scope, a timeline. Like, for example, perhaps the trustees wants to look into a new playground equipment, right? Now that falls under their domain. but there's just nobody really on the trustees who has the knowledge or the time or energy to look into, well, maybe this person could kind of take that on as a project and then offer a report back to trustees. And that way their name's not on a list.
Thank you.
They're not, yeah. Thank you for being with us for this hour. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Amen. Thank you.